Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution.
Welcome back to Walking Tall. Chris Malazewski back with you once again, along with Dr. Vanetta LaRosa and Todd Blylevin. Todd, tell us what it was like last week to have Woody, your rock, the best man in your wedding and a true hero in law enforcement, on our show last week.
It was, just amazing to have him on and to listen to the professional side of him. I get to know Woody from the backyard barbecues and us throwing rope together when we were doing our cowboy stuff. And yeah, it was so much fun. But I always knew, and I've been on ride-alongs with him back in the day. So I've seen him wear the uniform, back the blue, pull people over, watch him on the professional side, watch him switch from being funny, goofy Woody to super professional and wanting to help people. So it was really cool listening to his story, and I'm just so proud of him and everybody, all of our first responders across the country, globally. I think, anybody that puts on a uniform to help others, hats off to you. So it's cool to hear his stories.
Yeah, it was an honor to have him as our first guest for many reasons. But yeah, Dr. LaRosa, meeting Woody was new to you. He's a character, but he's an amazing man. And what were some of your takeaways?
Well, as you said, it was the first time that I have met him, and I felt as if he had a wonderful ability to know me, and I could almost feel his emotional IQ coming through our Zoom meeting. He has such a calming presence, and he has such a deep presence. I felt like it was very, very interesting in the very short time that I spent with him, how very much I felt that he knew us and knew me personally. And that's just a testament to his ability to use that emotional IQ to connect with people. So those skills being used in his line of work are just absolutely amazing. And I just felt safe around him. I felt as if I wanted to keep thanking him, and I didn't know why. And I didn't want to make him uncomfortable, but it was just such an overwhelming sense of respect and regard that I had for him and for the life's work that he's done. It was just my absolute pleasure to have met him.
Yeah, you said something that just resonated with me. You felt safe. And Todd, you don't even know this story about Woody. But Dr. LaRosa and Todd, you both know I've been kind of ill. I've been under the weather this week a little bit. I've had some sicknesses. I've had a cold, a headache, the whole nine. It's spring season, so we all get physically ill now and again. But it was also a big week for me. I had a large event at work. I had a lot of just pressures that I was feeling that week. And a couple nights ago, I was just really sick, and I broke down. I couldn't overcome the emotions that I was feeling and feeling ill, but also struggling mentally. And Todd, of course, you were the first person I thought to call, but you were out to dinner with your family. And so I picked up the phone and I called Brian Wood. And he talked to me for about 40 minutes this week, and we just had a conversation. He listened to me. He empathized with me. He talked to me down, if you will. He helped me catch my breath. He helped stop my tears. And he related to me. And I said, at the start of last week's show, when he came on, I was convinced and confident that had he not been the person he is and done what he's done for Todd and Walking Tall, Todd may not have done what he's been able to do for me. And just being able to pick up the phone now and have another member of a board of my directors and Brian Wood is just so humbling and just exactly what we're trying to create with Walking Tall. Exactly what our mission and vision is. So, Todd, I know you didn't know that story. I wanted to kind of spring it on you this week, but yeah, we spent the phone 45 minutes, and it was actually the night he was going to get his sleep test. He was going to get,
wow.
He was going into the hospital. So believe it or not, he was checking himself into the hospital. He had to sleep overnight to do the sleep apnea test or whatever. He was on his way to the hospital, picked up the phone. We talked for 45 minutes, and he was so apologetic that he had to cut me off because he had to go check into the hospital, do the sleep study. Like, that's the kind of man he is. He took the time on his way to the hospital to just talk to me, to settle me down, tell me everything was going to be okay, and help with my anxiety at that moment. So
Walking Tall.
Walking Tall, great example of that. So certainly
And
won't
a
surprise
new
you, Todd, right? I mean, it's not a shock to you to hear that about Woody, I assume.
No, not at all. I'm not shocked. It's who he is. He's wired that way, and he's just a special human being. So hats off
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly. And thank you, Todd, for introducing me to him and bringing him to Walking Tall. And Woody, if you're out there listening, man, thank you for being a part of the Walking Tall movement. We love you. But I got another story. You guys want to hear it?
Absolutely. Don't mind me. I'm going to grab my charger. I'm running low on
Oh,
battery.
All right, real
All right.
life.
This is live and in charge. So, anyways, I mentioned during my episode a couple weeks ago my affection for music. I absolutely positively love music. I love live music. I love going to concerts. I very rarely anymore do I watch television or the news for many reasons. So I'm always listening to music. And I love live events. So a couple weeks ago, I was going with my dad to see Bruce Springsteen. And if you recall in my story, I said I never, ever want to hear Born in the USA again because of that music being played very loud on the fire truck of which the 50 baseball players sat. So as I knew I was going to this concert with my dad, I like to be surprised at the set list. I don't often look online to see what the artists are playing. But I felt to protect myself, I had to see what the boss, if you will, was going to play. Fortunately, Born in the USA was not on the set list. So I felt very, very, very comfortable going to the concert. But had it been on the set list, I was developing a plan of how I was going to excuse myself from the arena at that time. I was going to speak to somebody. I was going to ask to go outside. I was going to do whatever it took to protect me from that trigger, if you will. But nevertheless, he didn't play it. So I stayed in the arena the whole show. Halfway through the concert, we had very good seats. And I was overlooking the stage and I saw somebody in the crowd collapse and they fell. And because I'm so vigilant in large crowds and arenas and things of that sort, I would pretty much bet I was the first person to see that man fall. I grabbed my dad's arm immediately and I said, "Dad, did you see that? Did you see that?" And he kind of looked and he's like, what? And I said, "That guy fell. Is everything okay?" And he kind of held my hand, my dad, and we watched the man get up. Okay. Now, if you've been to a concert, people fall all the time, people trip, whatever. So I caught my breath and I said, "Okay, the man's okay." Well, he fell again. And as I saw him fall, something came over me and I had this overwhelming feeling. I let go of my dad's hand and I just sprinted up the stairs. I had to get myself out of that arena because in my mind, a couple things could have been happening, right? I didn't hear shots, but it was potentially a shooting situation. Maybe this man got shot. Maybe he's having a heart attack or a stroke and EMS personnel are about to attend to him, things of that sort. I didn't want to see that. So I had to vacate the situation. I was triggered so bad in that moment. And it stunk, and it stunk. And because I love live music, I love concerts, I love being around people. And Todd, I know in your story, man, like you talked about music being a trigger to you, Jason Aldean, like, what's that like for you?
Yeah. First of all, I know, we spoke about what happened with you at that concert, and that's scary, and it's unfortunately it affects a lot of people that have dealt with adverse situations and especially situations that we've been in. So I'm sorry that you went through that, and I'm glad that you were able to come back in and enjoy the rest of your moment, because it meant so much, especially with you being there with your dad. So, which was awesome too. I got a chance to meet
That's right.
your
We
dad.
called you, didn't we? We called you on the way up, and that was
Yeah.
the first time you spoke to my dad. Yeah.
Yeah. So
He got
really, really,
emotional. I mean, what you don't know, Todd, like he was tearing up. He was just so emotional meeting you and talking to you. So thank you for taking that time to talk to him as we were driving up there. Yeah.
oh man, anytime. I can't wait to shake his hand one day. But you brought up something, and Dr. LaRosa Veneta. God, it's hard for me to try to
I
say
know.
that. So, anyways, I guess I just don't want to be disrespectful to you because of all the hard work, and that's such an achievement. But I know he is Vanetta. So
Of course. We're
all right.
among friends.
As long as you as a listener know that I am not being disrespectful. Okay.
Never.
No, this show is all about triggers, right? And trying to figure those out. And when I went through Route 91 and came back, and a lot of people decided they were going to just, go right through the adversity, jump back into the fire of it, and go to Jason Aldean concerts. And this is not, listen, Jason Aldean was there. He was as affected. His family was there as what any of us all were. And his staff members, I've spoken to a couple of his, equipment managers, like all these different people, because we got a chance to meet him. And we all have the same story, right? So this is not, I love Jason Aldean. I think what he's been able to do and his perseverance and go out and perform again is amazing. And it's a tribute to Walking Tall, right? For everybody. But for me, listening to the sound of his voice is, I can't scramble fast enough if I'm driving down the highway, even today, to turn his song off. And it breaks my heart because I'm literally like, I'll be driving nice and comfortable. A song will come on. I can recognize his voice. And it's like I go into panic mode and I'm pushing buttons just to try to like get it off. And I'm turning the volume down. And I don't want to do that because I feel like I'm being disrespectful to Jason for what he's gone through with us, right? And being there, he's part of my tattoo. This is part, like he's part of that. It's all country. It's country strong, and that mission and what he's been able to do to give back. But I went through that. I was not able to go back into concerts. People went back to concerts. They were able to like fight through their adversities. Obviously, everybody has their own stories. I was not able to go back because when I went back or attempted to go back to a concert, all I saw was what I saw those 8 hours, and I couldn't concentrate. I'm hyper vigilant. I still am that way today. But my wife sat me down about a year later, and Jason Aldean had come out with a new song, and it was a love song. And I was in the garage and I'm doing work, and I'm a hands-on guy. I like to do my own stuff. And so I'm in the garage, and she said, I want you to sit down. And so we sit down on the concrete floor, and she starts playing the Jason Aldean song on a video. It was a YouTube video. And I'm like, I don't really want to watch this. And she goes, no, just watch the video. And she was trying to humanize now Jason Aldean again to me, not just being a voice on the radio. And I sat through it, and it was 2 different videos. And I'll tell you, it was like somebody was like scraping glass all over me or something. I just didn't want to be there. I was so uncomfortable, but I sat through it, and I really appreciated that she was trying to help me understand and get through something where it wasn't the exact song, right? Like your 4th of July or Born in the USA. It wasn't that exact song that he was singing when the shots rang out, but it was still his voice. And so I thought it was okay. But honestly, just the other day, we're driving back up from College Station, and where we went and watched a baseball game with one of our friends, and Jason Aldean comes on the radio, and I'm scrambling now, and I'm going to turn it off. And even my wife says, I thought you were okay with this now. Like, I thought you were okay with him. I just don't know. There's the biggest trigger for music with me, which drives me crazy because I love country. There's some artists that sound very similar to Jason Aldean, and I'm cranking them off. Woody has, we brought him on. He shared a story with me about a certain song after a call that he had to go on that he just can't listen to anymore. It happens to everybody. I don't know why. I wish it didn't happen. So there's our first trigger between Chris and I and music, and something that we're both so passionate about. And does that get better? Does it at some point, is there some other technique that we can be doing? I know you try to process everything and separate it, but it's still really hard. It's still really hard.
No doubt, Chris, and Todd, because I know you both have triggers that you want to discuss today. A trigger it's a stimulus that elicits a response, right? And when we talk about stimuli, they could be sights, smells, feelings, the wind blowing by and giving you a tactile sensation. It could be an image that you pair with this extremely fearful or anxiety provoking situation. So there's so many different types of stimuli that become associated or paired with highly arousing and fearful situations that we don't know when we come out of something like that, what those lists of triggers are. And we don't know what in the environment will spark them. And so a person continuously might feel, people who have PTSD, sometimes they don't even experience anything until several months or maybe even years later. So there's no way to create this list of potential triggers before the fact. And so that leaves the person feeling very vulnerable. Like, what in this environment is going to spark me to have these extremely overwhelming, fearful, and anxious feelings? And I explained in some of our previous time together how the sympathetic portion of the autonomic nervous system and all of that sort of kicks in when we're in that mode. And then the whole process of calming, and how very draining and upsetting that could be to us physiologically. So people start to tend to fear the exposure to these stimuli that could elicit these responses. And then once people start living their lives in fear and trying to plan and block exposure to those various stimuli, that creates further anxiety. And then when the person tries to plan their life around avoiding those stimuli, then the anxiety increases even more. And then when that unexpected exposure comes to that stimuli, now you're off the charts with your anxiety, because this is the thing that you've told yourself that you have to avoid the absolute most. And so absolutely, positively, yes, there's cognitive behavioral methods out there that can help you desensitize your reactions to these stimuli. And, Chris, you were doing the right thing. Just, make lists of these stimuli, write them down. Anything that has that's been a potential trigger for you or a known trigger for you, write it down, keep your list going. There you go. And as you did before, Chris, make your plan, knowing that you're going to come into contact with it, but also know that there's so many different things that are encoded in our sensory reactions that can spark these feelings that we have not even planned for when you guys go through something like a PTSD response. And so when I talk about cognitive behavior methods, I'm talking about things like desensitization methods. In behavioral world, there's shaping methods. I mean, different things, like, for example, watching the video, Todd, watching the video with absolutely no sound, and then putting the sound up just a tiny bit, but give it only 1 second of exposure and let that land on you. Do some deep breathing around that, process that. And then over time, systematically increase your exposure to those events, knowing that the avoidance and the anxiety that comes with the unexpected stimulus is what's adding to your desire to get away from it or to avoid it. So it's, there's cognitive behavioral methods that that are known to be effective to help through these kinds of things.
So that's really helpful and insight, just the information there alone. And so I have a question though, because that would give me the opportunity to dictate that outcome, right? So if I know I'm going to work on those things at home, and I really want to be able to listen to, say, Jason Aldean, for example, again, then to know that I can put it on my Apple playlist or whatever, and I'm going to practice those therapeutic techniques. I love that, and I'm going to do that. But one question. So now the things that are out of my control, right? And so we talk about like a list of things, and I know Chris is going to talk about some stuff too, but you talk about Jason Aldean popping up on the radio while you're cruising down the highway, and you're like, oh my God, turn it off, because it's the instant. Now I can't go back. I want to listen to some other form of music or genre just for a little bit to like get me out. But like fireworks, for example, like in Chris and I's situation, combat vets, anybody that's been around any type of loud military, our guests that we're possibly going to be bringing on next week that Chris is going to allude to at the end of the show. Those things, those fireworks, that drives you crazy. Loud noises. I'm at a baseball game and this, they're just fans and they don't know what I'm going through, let alone all the other vets or people that have had that type of a trauma. But this guy's got, drumsticks and he's beating them on the back end of the chairs, and it's sounding, most things don't sound like what that gun sounded like that night to me, just because of the acoustics. I can separate the sounds really, really clear now, but that one did. So now I'm sitting there and I know where it's going. I know where it's coming from, but it's like, I can't get away from it. So how do you talk about breathing techniques? There's that instant trigger of moment where it takes you back into that fearful kind of scared moment. I don't like to be there. I want to be standing upright, challenge the adversity, go for it, not be fearful of that. But mentally, I mean, it wears on you and it's exhaustive.
Yes. And it's the avoidance of that feeling that's driving the anxiety. And that's why there are methods out there, like PTSD is an anxiety-based disorder. And when you look at something like a phobia, let's just say arachnophobia, people will
Good movie.
Oftentimes they'll engage in systematic desensitization, because it's a gradual exposure to the stimulus that is eliciting the fear, but it also takes you through a stepwise series of calming actions and various things that you can do to regulate yourself, breathing or progressive muscle relaxation. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do to train your body to relax. And what the technique does is it pairs your body's ability, your knowledge of your own internal antecedents and your understanding of your body's ability to relax, and it pairs it with that fearful stimulus in stages, so that when you come into contact with that stimulus, you will then know how to activate the calming sequence in your own body to cope and get yourself through it. Mm-hmm. And there's also another technique that's similar in concept called stress inoculation training. So it's giving you the coping skills and abilities to deal with that stressor when it comes upon you. Because as much as you like to think and plan and know these antecedent variables in your world that might cause you to feel this way, like you said, you cannot live your life avoiding them all, because that's going to make the anxiety worse, and it's going to make the eventual response to the fear worse.
That's a great point.
And so yeah, there are techniques and very, very well-trained professionals out there, and this could be another step to your therapeutic journey, is to look into some of these methods, because they're super successful when it comes to stuff like this.
And Chris, I want to make sure you're getting time here too, but I do want to say one thing on that, because it's been 5.5 years since Route 91 happened. And to your point, I have realized and recognized that if I go to, say, a tribute band concert here in North Texas in a smaller venue, very controlled, off of like a packing house type environment where it's all boxed in, the very first number of times I was very nervous. So that phobia, the arachnophobia, the concert phobia of me going to that now, because I've been at this particular location multiple times, I somewhat know what to expect. I know the law enforcement officer that's usually on duty. I've shaken hands with him. I know who he is. I know the exit points. I'm familiar with the surrounding settings. I know kind of what I'm going to be doing. And I've played that over and over and over in my head. So if I were to go back tonight, I'm a little bit more comfortable there. sitting at that baseball game, I have not been to many sporting events other than my kids' travel ball stuff, but I have not been in a crowd. I still have not been to a professional sporting event. I've been to college. I've been to in a suite. I was at a hockey game, but I've not sat in a crowd like at a baseball game yet in 5+ years. That kills me. But sitting there at that college station and listening to the drum beat, I wasn't prepared kind of for that environment. So I could see where maybe if I went back, is what you're saying, if I went back and did that 3 or 4 times, I'm going to kind of forward think, all right, I know what to expect. And it might be easier. Is that what you're saying?
In a sense, yes, because, as human beings, even without a trauma, we all have neurophysiological responses to perceived or actual threats, right? So we have a variety of neurotransmitters, that help us process these threats normally or efficiently would be serotonin and norepinephrine. So if we have, there's many people out there that have foundations of an anxiety disorder, depression, or whatever else, whatever have you, and their neurotransmitters, for lack of a better way to explain it, just, may be a little bit off when it comes to the innate ability to process these threats as efficiently as possible. But then when you add on an actual traumatic experience, like what you have both gone through, now you're creating a foundation from which these triggers are pulling from to reactivate you and put you back in that same fearful and threatening situation as the original time. So each time you experience these triggers and potential flashbacks, your body and your brain is going through that same experience all over again, which is making it much, much harder for you to then want to deal with these triggers and understand them and desensitize yourself to them, because they just feel horrible. I mean, it just must feel so horrible and traumatic and draining when your brain brings you back to those places, and it's scary. And it's okay to say that it's scary. And, when people are in fear and when they get into avoidance mode, that's when it's hardest to look for these techniques and to say, wow, I'm going to walk into a therapist's office and she's going to put me through systematic desensitization or stress inoculation training, and I'm going to have to think about all this stuff again. And it's very natural for us as people to just want to avoid that. And that's what we've talked about, sort of off, screen before. This is how people begin to self-medicate a lot of the time. This is when people overdrink and they use drugs or other kinds of behaviors to kind of drown their pain, and that's what we want. We want to explain this to people and let them know that, there is absolutely no shame in saying, I'm afraid to get this treatment because I'm afraid to go back there. I don't want to feel this again, and if we can do that for people and encourage people to get the help that they need, lives can be saved. And I think the quality of life for people who have been exposed to these horrible things can be improved because
exactly,
they work.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that resonates with me. We've talked a little bit about today already what I would call the controllable triggers, right? Like Todd knows Jason Aldean. I know Born in the USA with Bruce Springsteen. The things that we can avoid, right? What I will say, to you two and our listeners, like, the thing I struggle with the most is the uncontrollable, right? I think I referenced in my story, just the horror of hearing children screaming and mothers screaming and that, right? So in my household, I have 2 young kids. I have an 8 and a 6-year-old, and my son Lucas is 6, and he's my best friend, and he's the most easily excitable little dude on the planet. And he shrieks and shrills and yells and screams at everything. Not to mention, we also have just a chaotic neighborhood, and there's kids everywhere that play and all these things. And those are the things that, in my house, particularly when he gets loud or he screams or he shrieks or he's fighting with my daughter, like, I shut down. Like, I cannot in any way, shape, or form handle it. And, and admittedly, right, at times, speaking to the self-medication, right, like, I turn to cannabis now and again to just calm myself to a little degree so I can be desensitized to a degree, if you will, and calm my nerves. So that way I know when he yells, okay, it's okay, but it's very startling. So yeah, like Dr. LaRosa, what's the difference between like knowing what you can control and then exposing yourself to the things you can't? Like that, I think of people who have like medical PTSD, right? Like they've been wronged by the medical system and they don't want to go to a doctor, things of that sort. Like you need a doctor. How do you overcome those things? Like to me, that's the hardest trigger I have right now, is just thinking back to my experience on the 4th and hearing the kids and the moms, and then just everywhere you go to Walmart, Target, there's a screaming, crying kid on the ground. He's not getting his toy, whatever the funny thing is. But like, how do we deal with that?
Right. Well, that's the anxiety provoking part. What you just said, it's that all encompassing feeling of there's so much out there in the universe that I can't control. And every day that I step foot out into the world, I could be faced with a variety of triggers. Some of them I know, some of them I've yet to learn. And to go out every day and live your lives and not shut down and not completely close those walls is a struggle. And it's a step-by-step process, because a lot of people with PTSD do exactly that. They end up becoming emotionally neutral to everything in their lives, because the simple opening up of an emotional feeling has the potential to open the door for the trigger to elicit something that they absolutely do not want to feel. And so that is what overcomes people, who've been through these sorts of traumas. And I say, in a way, the process is the same for each and every single event that triggers that emotional response in you. The circumstance is going to be the exact same. So for example, if you think about OCD, which is another anxiety-based disorder, if a person has threats, let's just say harm OCD, they feel, now they're a perfectly normal, upstanding, non-dangerous person, but in their mind, they are believing or seeing themselves or telling themselves that they're going to stab their mother or dog or whatever else have you. And so these thoughts and these images are infiltrating this person, obsessive thought patterns. And so compulsions begin to develop, either to avoid those thoughts and images, or they just avoid stimuli altogether that relate to it. So a knife will make them want to walk out of the room. A scissor sitting on the counter will make them want to, turn their back away from it. But the process is to touch that knife, to touch that scissor. The process is to write stuff down in a notebook and say, I'm going to stab my dog. They're not going to do it, but they're facing the very worst of their thought process, and there it is on paper. Or they record a little story of what their OCD is telling them to do, and they listen to it again and again and again, because there's no indication and there's no likelihood that person is going to follow through or carry out. That's not the type of mental illness that leads to violent crime. That is just not how it happens. So the treatment is sort of controlling that overwhelming thought process that leads you to that anxiety state, and facing it and dealing with it and breaking it down step by step as it comes up. And for people who have OCD, it never really goes away, but people learn how to, in a sense, control it, or I'd say redirect it. And that is really the mission for people who have these triggers, and then this growing, fear of having these triggers, because things can overgeneralize. You could start, one trigger, can begin, and then that could pair itself with a secondary trigger. And then, by the end of it, you have 500 triggers that, that are developed because they kind of pair with each other. So it really, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had also just, over about the last 3 months, and this, I can't even explain why. It has nothing, if I reflect back on my experience of the 4th, it has really nothing to do with it. But about the last 2 or 3 months, I've started to feel this fear of claustrophobic. Like, I don't like confined spaces as much as I was comfortable with, right? Great example. I go get my hair cut the other day, and they put a hot towel on my face and give me a little face rub. I had no interest in having that towel on my face. I've gone to that place 500 times before, and I put the towel on my face, and I like the face massage and I like the hot towel, but I asked her immediately, can you please take that off me? I had no interest in that. Right. So Todd, are you having like new things pop up randomly that you've never even considered being a part of your experience? I mean, how's that looking for you, man?
Yeah, 100%. What, you're talking about right there, I can relate to not wanting to be confined, not wanting my sensories to be distracted. And I think that might be a part of what you're talking
Exactly.
about.
Exactly.
Making sure, even like when we go to
Alert.
church and, most of the time you're bowing your head, I know the good Lord above knows how I'm feeling. I'm not bowing my head because I'm keeping my eyes on everything that's moving left and right, so I can make a move and protect those around me and maybe eliminate what potentially could be a threat. I'm never bowing my head or never putting myself in a position to where I'm hidden from something. And that's, like we talked about, the trigger comes on, and I think it's like, if I'm going to a location now, I'm going to try to somewhat investigate where I'm going, especially if it's new. We talk about me sitting up against the wall, right? And I know a lot of law enforcement, first responders, people, veterans I spoke to, they got their back up against the wall because they like to see everything that's in front of them, because we're always at a vigilant state, unfortunately, but it's just the way it is right now. And I know the way I'm wired, I'm going to go immediately to that threat, opposed to, hunkering down somewhere. That's just who I am. So I need to be able to be in a position to throw something, to get something, to pull something, whatever it is, and to eliminate. But as I'm going through that process, that's not only exhaustive, then finally, as it starts to calm down, you start to have a good time in your situation, wherever you're at. So now I'm relaxed. I still know I'm still vigilant, but I've gone through all my checks and balances of what I'm doing. The then aftermath of that, like, or if a situation happens, like a triggering response, like what happened at College Station, Chris, you go to cannabis, right? Or you go to other meditation type
areas.
I
don't want to give our listeners the assumption or perception that I'm a pothead.
No, I'm not saying that.
And that's okay if you are too, but no judgment.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's medicinal to me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. But, and I'm not saying that, but like for me, I've learned how to self-control super quick. And that's my own faith. I say a quick prayer. I pray to God that the angels are wrapping their wings around me and that they're shielding me from any type of adversity that I'm about to encounter. And I'm just praying for peace, pray for that armor of love to be just wrapped around me. And that helps me kind of stand back up and walk tall, because I know that I'm strong in that sense. And mentally, that's where I've gotten myself, but it's taken me a long time to get there. And a lot of heartache along the way. So I know, Chris, you're literally in the fight of this. And
can I throw something in there, Todd, that I would encourage you both to talk to your therapist about and try to do? The process that you just described. Now, if you were to pair that with some deep breathing exercises, which you can be taught to do, and progressive muscle relaxation, which you can be taught to do, and you could pair that with your prayers, and you could do that several times a day when you're in the comfort and quiet of your own home, and you can visualize the need to do it and you practice this, what happens over time is that your body is going to remember that sequence. And then when you are faced with a threatening stimulus, you're going to be able to enact that more quickly. And it's just going to help you. It's going to give you the confidence that you can face anything. And when things come at you that you don't plan, if you practice that sequence over and over again in a variety of safe time, you can expand it to those known triggers and planning situations like your concerts. And then it can also be generalized to the potential unknowns as well.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's just kind of understanding what you can take right now too, right? And like I used to be a huge war movie buff. I can't watch those anymore. Used to watch a couple TV shows that had, more crime investigative. I can't watch those anymore.
Slow and steady. That's why
yeah.
under the advisement of a therapist, just the things that you've already said with your praying and your visualization of the angels and, having those feelings in that moment. Just take that exact scenario and do it at home in quiet and peace several times a day. Don't add any stressors, don't do anything without therapeutic support, but it's the practice that enables your body and your brain, the connection between, to enact those responses when you'll need to a little bit more quickly. And the more you do it, the more confidence you have that you can do it. And, over time, God willing, the easier it gets.
Sure. And one thing I've learned too through my therapist, Dr. Lou Estrada, and she's provided at our support group at work, she was talking about, when your thoughts or your triggers start to take over, essentially grounding yourself with some physical sensation, right? So what she handed out to all of us, which was awesome, she gave each of the members of our support group at work these rings, and they're very thick and they're almost pointy. They're like sharp, almost like a thimble. And what she encouraged us to do, and what I've been doing at work, and I've been doing like when I'm driving around town in Highland Park, where I'm going past some of these areas of which I have recollections of my day, the ring rolls up and down my finger, and it leaves marks and impressions, and it's not painful, but it's a sensation that's not necessarily comfortable. And it grounds me, and it tells me right away, like I'm in a safe space, even though my mind is wandering.
Wow.
And
it's tangible. That's why it's
Cool.
it's giving you a stimulus connection to the tangible here and now. And it's letting you know you're not really in that fearful situation. Your brain thinks you are for a minute, but when you enact a tangible, touchable, circumstance like that, especially something sensory, that is exactly what the point is. And that technique is used with people who are mentally ill, who suffer from delusions and hallucinations. It's to bring them to something tangible, in those.
It's really worked. And I said, jokingly, I was like, man, doc, I never thought I'd need a fidget spinner, but it's kind of like that, so doctor, like what type of sensations, fidget spinners, all these types of things are now becoming more prominent in society. My kids have a ton of them. I'm sure you work with a lot of clients and families in your practice that you kind of prescribe those. So like you talked about the tangibility, but what are some other types of tools that, Todd or I or somebody who's listening to us can use aside from a rough ring? One of my coworkers showed me, she has a thimble, one of those rubber thimbles that you use to move paper. And she rubs her finger on that thing all day, and it really helps her. So what other kind of tools do you think you can give us?
You could think of a box of these types of things. They all do the same thing, whether it's the bubble puncher, whether it's the ring, whether it's a bracelet, whether it's a rubber band that you snap, whether it's putting your hands in cold water. The point is really all the same. And that is like a crisis response. It's like it's getting you out of like the crisis mode, and it's getting you out of reliving that trauma in that particular moment. It's just the first step, but then it's the deep breathing, the progressive muscle relaxation, the stress inoculation training, the desensitization. That takes time, and that takes a lot of work, and that takes a lot of retraining your brain and sort of redirecting your patterns of anxiety. So that goes together. If you can learn to use all these techniques in combination, it's just people learn to deal with a variety of circumstances, whether they are physical ailments. These go into the mental area. So these are valid tools, and these are things that people should pride themselves in using and say, hey, I'm proud of myself that I can enact this sequence of treatment for myself right now, and that's
walk
what
tall for yourself. Walk tall for yourself.
I love
Exactly.
that.
Advocate. And when people ask what you're doing, be open and vulnerable with them. So that way they'll do so with others. So Todd, do you have any, before we start to wrap up, do you have any tangible techniques? Do you have any, sensory items you use? What do you got in your bag of tricks?
Well, I would say that it's nothing probably physical, just because I can't wear anything on my wrists anymore. I used to wear watches all the time. Because of that night, I just can't wear stuff. I used to have a gold, other than my wedding ring, but I went to a really awesome marketing convention in Nashville after Route 91 had happened. And I was stuck up on the very first table, which drove me crazy because I couldn't see anything behind me. I was there for like 3 days. It was an incredible experience, an incredible workshop. But my mind was constantly always, checking things. Some of the examples that they were showing, like on the marketing side, related to some sort of war type deal or emotional toll on like kids. And it was really bad. But the one comforting thing that I really learned about that, and I carry into today, is we break off into these team sessions and they would play comforting classical study music.
Oh,
And all of a sudden, like, I was like at ease. And here I was like in this kind of like state of constant vigilance. And then all of a sudden, like I allowed me to concentrate. So I went back, I was in therapy at the time. And so I talked to Diane, my therapist, and I said, so here's what was going on. Like 3 days, I'm exhausted. I went through all this. So she's telling me all the reasons why. And then that's when I really learned, like, don't go put yourself in the front of the room. Like I used to like to sit in the front of the class. Now I'm sitting in the back of the class. I'm still going to get the same education from it. But what I did learn was, she said, white noise can really help you. And so I have been, from that day to today, and probably forever now, when I get into my office and I'm about to get to work where I need some concentration, or even if I find myself in a situation where I feel my anxiety's up a little bit, just in life, I'll put on classical and listen to my classical study music. There's some great podcasts, or not podcasts, but playlists out there where it's just really comforting, soft. I mean, it is. I'm a big, tall, I feel like I'm a big, strong guy, but I love the classical, and it just lets me concentrate.
We have to do a segment on the effects of music on your brain, because it's real. My husband plays classical guitar, and for himself, it's a huge anxiety reducer. It's a whole nother topic, but you're onto something so valid, so valid.
So funny. As we wrap up today's show, I just think back and I laugh. I often laugh at you and I's, our relationship, Todd, because we're complete opposites, man. Like, it's crazy. You're 6'5", 2 something. I'm like 5'10", this little city kid. You're country strong. I'm a city slicker. You like classical music. I got Pearl Jam posters behind me. Like, we talk about all the differences, and country guy, like all the differences that we have amongst our lives. Dr. LaRosa, you as well, living on Long Island, like Todd being in the country, like, but the experiences we've had throughout our lives make us very similar, because we all come in the same place, right? And I think that's exactly what Walking Tall can do for you as a listener, for the three of us as part of this movement, is really, really, really bring it home to say, no matter our differences, no matter how many differences we have in interest or experiences, we all in some form or fashion come together to walk tall for ourselves and each other by just disclosing these experiences, being relatable, having conversations like this. This was really our first kind of open forum discussion that we've had since we've started this show. And it's just felt really good. It's just been really, really fun. It's been engaging. And it's just been therapeutic for me to say, like, yeah, when my son screams, it scares me now. Or yeah, when Todd hears Jason Aldean, he cringes, right? And I want you as a listener to also know, like, it's okay to have these similar types of triggers, and it's okay to tell people about them, and it's okay to prevent them, and it's okay to work through them. So before we wrap up, Todd, I want to just give you one more chance to, say anything you haven't said yet for our listeners, or for yourself, or for Dr. LaRosa and I.
Yeah, I would just encourage, those that are listening right now, and who I'm talking to, you're listening to us through your earbuds at home, you're watching us on YouTube, on your laptop, or on your TV. Know that we're doing this show for you, right? Not only is it therapeutic for us as individuals to talk about our circumstances, but it's extremely therapeutic for us to want to help. That's who we are as a trio here on Walking Tall. What this movement is all about, like you described, Chris. But reach out to us.
Yes, please.
WalkingTallMovement.com. Email us at the info@walkingtallpodcast.com. Our contacts on there. Let us know if there's something that you want us to talk about. You know what I mean? Like that's who, because we've got these listeners. Talking to Ian this last week, Chris, was really awesome. What a cool individual that was. And we'll go into who he is later down the road. But the one thing I really learned was, as we're doing these podcasts, we're really talking to one person. It's you that's listening to us. It's you that's watching us. So how can we help you? What is on your mind? Maybe there's someone that you're listening for, and we want to be able to give advice or talk about something or bring more awareness out on something that we can maybe get our network involved and be able to share and help. That's what we're trying to do, right? So I just wanted to end my comments on that right there. And Dr. LaRosa, I can't tell you, I love the open forum, Chris, that you kind of set up for today, because this is what it's all about, like learning, listening to you kind of throw all these fancy words all over the place.
My head exploded like 10 times.
No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Dr. LaRosa, before we sign off, thank you for your just amazing input today. Thank you for bringing relatable, common sense examples to a complicated situation. You know, that's exactly, what we need in these types of conversations. So thank you for doing that. And before we sign off, anything you want to say one more time?
Yeah, I just want to say, please don't give up. As these triggers and these fearful stimuli may overwhelm you, and they may seem all encompassing and really hard to get away from, you might make some mistakes. You might try to self-medicate. You might turn people away in your life. You might have anger or rage in an unprovoked manner. You may treat people in a way that you're not proud of later. Don't give up. Those situations can be forgiven, will be forgiven. They will be worked out. You matter. There's therapy out there, and there's research behind everything that I say. And I know that these methods have helped many, 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 many people. And, my training in behavioral psychology, neuropsychology, cognitive psychology, all of it, I don't know everything, of course, my goodness, who can? And there are some wonderful professionals out there who have specialized training in the areas that I just simply touched upon today. They do exist. Please don't give up. Keep trying to find your person, find your therapist, and do not give up on yourself.
Absolutely.
Walk tall.
That's exactly Walking Tall. And, Todd and I heard a story this past week from who is going to be next week's guest about an experience of which this individual, his name is Chris Brown, was triggered. And he acted out in an unimaginable fashion, simply not characteristic of him in any way, shape, or form. And I'm confident he's going to share that story with us next week. So as I said, please join us next week as Chris Brown joins us. He's a hero in his own right. He's been walking tall essentially his whole life. He's been a veteran and now is a professional. He's been a member of the United States Marine Corps, served both in Iraq and Afghanistan, ultimately receiving the Purple Heart. He's now a mental health professional and an absolute advocate on many levels. He's co-founded Growing Veterans, which is an awesome charity helping veterans through agriculture. He serves as a therapist for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and he's the owner of Peak Psychotherapy in Seattle. I promise you, you're not going to want to miss next week's show with Chris Brown on it. But thank you for listening. And as Dr. LaRosa said, don't give up and walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody.
Walk tall. Come on, doctor. Let's go. Walk tall.
I said at the same time Todd was. Walk tall.
All right, everybody. Have a great week.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, The Balance Project. Check them out at www.thebalance-project.org. Thank you so much for being a proud supporter of the Walking Tall movement.